And call me a white person from the Midwest talking about my dear old grandfather because oh my gosh, do I love Pawpa.
It's me.
Islet's fourth, kind of fifth release since debut, Mamihlapinatapai, is a South American word named after a look that is shared between two people, each wishing that the other would initiate something that they both desire, but which neither wants to begin. And so this is an album about the many tensions between desire and action, the moments when everyone involved understands what they want, yet everyone waits for someone else to make the first move, so ultimately nothing happens. This sense of hesitation is used as a surprisingly flexible narrative device, contrasting ideas of romance and fandom to the anxieties that come from a loss of control in relationships. The emergence of the word Mamihlapinatapai in pop culture over the last 20 years is sometimes traced back to a 2011 documentary called Life in a Day, directed by Kevin McDonald, who describes the purpose of the film as a metaphor of the experience of being on the internet, clicking from one place to another in this almost random way, following our own thoughts, following narrative and thematic paths. The documentary features several videos from people all around the world to simulate this effect, and the person who introduced the term in the documentary describes it as such.
I love the word Mamihlapinatapai. It's from the Agan language, which is now a dead language, but the meaning is quite beautiful. It means that moment or feeling when two people both want to initiate something, but neither wants to be the one to start it. It can be perhaps two tribal leaders both wanting to make peace, but neither wanting to be the one to begin it.
And this is my hook. Two tribal leaders who want to make peace with one another, but neither will be the first to do it. The volunteer's dilemma, in which people are faced with a decision that will benefit everyone, but which asks for a sacrifice, and so nothing happens. Nobody wants to make the first move that would benefit everybody out of a fear of looking weak. Islet's connecting this term to online fandoms for the title track is very interesting in this context. Oh my gosh. One thing about Islet is that they're going to go all in on a narrative idea. This album does so much to complete the concept of the term in meaningful ways with several observable layers to it. At first glance, it uses the South American Yagan word to primarily describe the feeling of an action in pursuing a relationship, despite both parties feeling the same way about each other. And contrasting against the group's otherwise dreamy electropop catalog is the quite ornery It's Me, a techno-pop EDM club song using the metaphor of a fan's relationship with their idol to outline a story about the feeling of uncertainty after a first date. And what should you even call a relationship at that point? The song's refrain, the very teasing "who's your bias, I'm your bias" call and response, also sees the members rejecting narratives that are placed upon them. They decide to attribute value to themselves, insisting that they're not one-dimensional and are, quote, irreplaceable and more expensive than Prada. The song's much more grating soundscape by Islet standards makes a lot of sense in these ways. I really didn't expect it, but I think my favorite part of the song's production is that banging metallic sound that shifts us between sections and ideas.
It's me.
I'm always on the lookout for it when I'm returning to this song. It's like hitting a frying pan with a metal crowbar. The song's metallic edges give this narrative theme of uncertainty and appropriately irritating physicality, right? That banging industrial percussion that keeps pushing the song from one section into another. It feels like someone or something that is impatiently interrupting this fantasy. I don't know, it makes a lot of sense in ways that feel satisfying. We get these moments of fantasy in the dreamy pre-choruses, but then the more harrowing sense of anxiety tied to the song's narrative about losing control sort of straps a rock to us and we plummet back down to the real world for the chorus. The song's primary focus on the metaphor of fandom introduces yet another layer to this world. The fan and idol are in some ways technically in a relationship of sorts, but it's an asymmetrical one, built around mutual projections. The fan wants recognition for their investment and devotion, while the idol wants to be understood as a person beyond the image being projected onto them. Both sides are participating in the relationship, yet neither can fully control how it develops or what it comes to mean. This makes for a dynamic similar enough to the idea behind Mamihlapinatapai. Two people who want something from one another, waiting for the other person to make the first move, because doing so means giving up some degree of control. Of course, this becomes even more interesting given Islet's own relationship with fandom discourse. It's Me doesn't explicitly address the conflicts that have surrounded this group, and I think it's more effective because it doesn't. Islet certainly don't owe anybody an explanation, and they deserve to be able to express themselves in a way that centers who they are. The song decides to turn the anxiety over control into something very playful, almost teasing at times. The members acknowledge the projections being placed upon them while refusing to let them define who they are. the "who's your bias, I'm your bias" refrain becomes a sort of assertion of self in this context. They're the ones who set the terms and their own value. It's me, right? They're actively a participant in the hesitation or hesitating dynamic of Mamihlapinatapai as a means of preserving themselves. This song recognizes the desire for control that exists on both sides, while I guess ultimately locating the member's sense of self somewhere beyond that. In these ways, the song doesn't really work at all to resolve the uncertainty of this dynamic. The response, or I guess resolution to this, is just to insist that they have a say in this negotiation. So this is the stage that is set. The album begins with a word describing two people caught in the tension between shared desire and inaction, finding a new version of that tension in the relationship between an idol and the people who watch them. These circumstances are different in some ways, but the underlying question of authority is what ties these ideas together. It's Me works to answer the question by simply giving islets the authority over themselves. All of this also connects back to islets' larger concept in some very interesting ways, in my opinion, especially the recurring relationship between the real and imagined worlds that they established from debut. Super Real Me outlines the power of imagination, drafting a space where the members can explore desires and possibilities that feel somewhat difficult to access in real life. My World invites us into the universe, while Magnetic and Lucky Girl Syndrome turn the law of attraction into something of a magical resource that can be used to get what you want. The Dream World offers a space where desire can exist freely. You can imagine a version of yourself without having to contend with the limitations of reality. Actually pursuing those dreams introduces a different kind of risk, though. At some point, you have to leave the safety of imagining what could happen and risk finding out what actually will happen. The chaos at the center of It's Me, the choice of introducing a more heavy and grating soundscape as they wrestle with anxieties about losing control, forms such a compelling musical bridge in terms of concept. To put all of this plainly, I haven't even really started talking about the music yet, but this is why I'm such a fan of this group. They have spent almost all of their career being criticized for a supposed lack of originality, which I disagree with, but I think that makes this album's focus on fandom especially interesting and intriguing. There's something almost Mamihlapinatapai about having this conversation in the first place. Acknowledging how pop culture actually works means admitting that borrowing from existing trends are fundamental parts of the entertainment industry. It also means confronting the uncomfortable possibility that Islet as a group have been asked to answer for a problem that extends so far beyond them, while receiving so little credit for what they actually do with those influences and how well they adapt them. By this point, Islet has become one of the groups I think most clearly demonstrates the value of thoughtful synthesis. Their concepts draw from recognizable ideas, most things in pop culture do, but they consistently take the time to build it into something of its own. Mamihlapinatapai is maybe the greatest showcasing of this yet. Like, a relatively obscure word is given enough thought and consideration that it becomes the foundation for an album that considers severalfold the ideas of romance and fandom, and importantly, the risks involved in actually pursuing what you want. This is where I think the members deserve recognition too, certainly more than they've been given. The performances have a sincerity that lets them inhabit these concepts completely. They understand how to commit to the silly or comical parts of Islet while still taking the emotional ideas and stakes seriously. And for all the conversation about whether Islet are original enough, I think the more interesting question is what they are actually doing with the things they synthesize. On that front, Islet is one of the leading groups in terms of concept development these days. I will stand by that. Now, diving a bit into the album finally, and going in order, Mamihlapinatapai is still very much grounded in Islet's characteristic dreamscapes. I'm a bit surprised by the people who initially panned the album as sounding nothing like Islet. I would argue that even It's Me stays faithful enough to the sound and concept while working to introduce new ideas, which I think is very important at this point in their career. But starting with the first song, Get Ready With Me is the characteristic dreamscape that listeners have come to appreciate about Islet. I think it was actually this song that the members mentioned during promotions that it was originally at some point a contender for their debut album. It does sound like it could have been on Super Real Me, but I think in that case, holding off on its release was a very good choice in retrospect. This song works really nicely to add a new dimension to this album specifically. Narratively, the song introduces the album's overarching concept by focusing on the, I guess, seemingly simple act of someone affirming their own value while getting ready for the day. Embedded within this routine is the repetitive "what you say" refrain, and while it's left a little bit unexplained on its lonesome, I think the line can be easily enough interpreted as asking for a friend's opinion on a look, while simultaneously also tapping into the deeper curiosity and growing anxiety of not knowing what the other person is truly thinking. Musically, this dynamic allows the track to function as a bridge into the group's thematic universe. The dreamy synth pads of this song wrap us in a very hazy headspace, outlining how the act of transformation and getting ready serves as that transitional liminal space in one's own sense of self that Islet entertain as a very heavy part of their concept. A song that is literally about getting ready. It places us in a moment where something is about to happen but hasn't yet. Just as the building anxiety or maybe wariness of this kind of anticipation peaks, the ethereal production suddenly shifts. And now that we have gotten ready, the dreamscape kind of breaks, dropping us suddenly back into the real world as the album progresses into the very striking atmosphere of the title track. In my opinion, It's Me functions a bit like Little Monster from the group's previous standard album, Bomb. It follows through on the anxiety introduced by the opening track, immediately thrusting listeners into the central premise of Mamihlapinatapai. Here, our narrator grapples with a profound loss of control in a relationship, sort of haunted by the prospect that everything they've dreamed of could turn out differently or even end in rejection. Its message poetically concealed by the metaphor for fandom and having a bias in a group. And as I said, the standout musical moment for me are those industrial, metallic, pots and pans noises strewn across the song. They're just loud and have enough force to them that they sound almost like moments of pain, like scraping your feet, I guess, against the ground in the real world when your sense of control over a situation begins to feel fleeting. I do very much wish that we had a bridge here, though. I think we needed a bridge. Ending the track on a slightly modified version of the refrain does complete the thematic idea well enough, but I don't know, it cheapens the broader narrative arc. Kooky, quirky concepts in K-pop require a certain level of creative commitment that really only a bridge can fully live up to. There needs to be a distinct moment of emotional reprieve before the final act doubles down on the song's intentions. That being said, on a conceptual level, I can appreciate how the track's shortness intentionally refuses to offer a clean end to the narrative, right? There's no real resolution here because, true to the album's concept, neither party wants to act on how they feel. So I guess this justifies the structure in retrospect. It still leaves a lingering desire for more. We could have arrived at the same idea with a bridge. Islet is simply not a group that benefits from the no bridge epidemic. They have too much to talk about. Moving on, the album brings us into what is maybe one of the best songs of all time, I have decided, Pawpa. This song features an extremely digitized approach to electropop, relying almost entirely on static-infused production and lyrical repetition to drive its momentum, and it works. For all the many conversations we've had about overuse of repetition in pop music, this is an absolute masterclass in execution of how to do it well, in my opinion. And despite my pro-bridge rhetoric, I do really have the time to defend short songs when they are done right, and Pawpa is a short song done exactly right. The magic lies in how dynamically the production plays with the refrain, the moments where the vocals slow down and then they pick right back up, and then the very brief pause just before the final paw in each line. It adds such an incredible texture to the melody. And just beneath the surface, there are distant, sort of sparkling flourishes in the background that evoke very strong late 2000s and Frutiger era vibes. I would place the song maybe in 2010 or 2011. I imagine it being used as a YouTube fan edit made by a very dedicated teenager, and I mean that in the utmost highest regards. This is the kind of music that magic is made out of when it comes to fandom culture. Narratively, the song touches on the sort of unspoken bond people share with their pets. There's a sense that the narrator wishes she could understand her pet's thoughts and how they feel about her. And while I guess this idea subtly ties back to the album's central concept of unspoken connections, I think it more so functions as a standalone thing rather than a heavy meta-narrative about animals. Musically, this digitized electropop sound is such a great territory for Islet. I think the raw abrasiveness of It's Me may have colored people's perceptions of this sonic direction, but Pawpa really proves it's an excellent space for them to expand their artistic identity. The late 2000s, early 2010s sound also overlaps a lot with liminal spaces, and me personally, very selfishly, I have been longing for a K-pop group to tackle this time period and the Frutiger era adjacent aesthetics. Islet just might be the group to go there, but we will have to see. Love this song, definitely my favorite from the album. We then progress to the title track, or I guess it's the titular track, Mamihlapinatapai, which clarifies the album's core theme by introducing another incredible metaphor, quote, "I don't care, even if it's hot Americano." In other words, a barista messing up your morning iced coffee order by serving it hot, even something as catastrophic as that, fails to shake our narrator's composure. While again very playful in narrative discussion similar to It's Me, this song illustrates a mature sense of self that rises entirely above, ordinary everyday grievances. The earlier tracks in this album grapple with more abstract anxieties, but this song suggests that this terrifying fear of losing control often triggers from the deeper fear of being misunderstood. Very strikingly, the song adds great nuance to the Mamihlapinatapai dynamic, reframing the standstill moment of hesitation as a kind of necessary virtue, a vital boundary between yourself and the rest of the world that you need to make. And so musically, the track relies on slow-moving disco sensibilities to reinforce this carefree, unbothered attitude, hot ice Americano in hand on the dance floor. yeah, the mid-tempo groove mirrors this genuine lack of interest in explaining yourself to anyone else. And then the airy vocal layers help the production anchor the narrative's discussion of emotional independence. I think characteristic to this sect of disco influence, the music refuses to rush or overexert itself in order to capture the luxury of stepping back from external pressures, the enlightenment that you achieve. Finally, we round out the album with Love Older You. Very heartfelt message from the members to their younger selves with a surprisingly grim or sad edge to its production. This song works as another thematic anchor for the project, pinning down some of the larger points of the album by penning a letter to their younger selves that, despite the animosity and turmoil, things will work out in the end and brighter days are ahead. The song in this way utilizes its slightly alt-pop atmosphere and moody pop textures to create a contrast between narrative hope and a sort of musical grief. I don't know if anybody else feels this way. I think especially the arrangement of the keys and the low hum of the bass in the chorus gives the song such a somber feel to it, despite its otherwise uplifting message. It adds a very complicated feeling to the struggles they had to endure to get to this point. Obviously, it was insanely unfair and unfounded what they went through, and I think that's what the music is working to speak to, even as the members have found it within themselves to move on to some extent. And so musically, this duality allows the production to mirror the psychological process of healing and growing. Again, the soft humming just barely above the bass line adds an air of consideration, inferring that this is, of course, likely a conversation that hasn't finished yet. It's a good thing, though, if nothing else, that they feel that they've moved on from what all they went through enough to process it and start writing about it. I think by leaning on or relying on that brooding low end, the song honors the very heavy weight of their past. It all works together to make such a thoughtful conclusion to the album. This song does so well to, I guess, stir the complexity of the Mamihlapinatapai concept one last time before we end, refusing to allow themselves or even the concept of this album to be confined to just one thing. And ultimately, it is this concluding weight that defines the project's success for me. The album is characteristic to Islet on average, but adds enough new elements that push us forward into more thoughtful territories with their concept in mind. More than anything, it proves that this group is more than capable of balancing their signature style with a willingness to look inward, using Mamihlapinatapai as a lens through which they can confidently process their own growth as artists. Very, very excellent approach to concept work, as always, when it comes to Islet. So excited to see what new musical territories they'll cover beyond this point. I think their last two releases, like the digital single I'm Not Cute Anymore and Not Me, paired with this album, truly so excited, and certainly hope that the members continue to be involved and writing their own works. But yeah, these are my thoughts. Thank you for watching this. If you did, let me know what you think about the album, also what you think about It's Me's place in Islet's discography and their conceptual identity, your favorite songs from the album, and things like that. Yes, thanks again for watching. Subscribe if you want to, and I will see you next time.